Thank you. All right, everyone. Brian, you want to switch to the next slide, please? Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the James Street Eco Campus Hub presentation and discussion. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few Zoom tips really quickly and explain a couple of things. We're using the Zoom webinar function tonight. So as an attendee, your microphone and cameras are currently turned off and muted. When it comes time for the discussion portion, the host will ask you to unmute, and then you'll be able to do that. We ask that if you wish to speak during the discussion portion or ask a question, use the raise hand function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And then if you feel more comfortable or you find it easier, we also welcome you to use the Q&A function as well on Zoom, right at the bottom. We will also be posting some questions in there as the presentation goes along, so be sure to check that out as well. All right, and thank you all for being here again. To start, I'm Andrew Levin, City Planner for the City of Peavey. Tonight with me is Brian Kuchar, Associate Principal at Horsley Witten Group, and Brian Leverrier, who is Landscape Architect also at Horsley Witten Group. Brian, you want to switch slides, please? Great, so quickly just go through the agenda for tonight's meeting. Start off with a quick introduction, a little bit background on the project. And then we're going to go into a presentation and then discussion. And right before we begin, I just want to also thank some of the people in attendance right now. City Councilor, Ward Councilor for Ward 4, Ed Jerez is in attendance. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank the other City Council members here as well, along with school committee members, Conservation Commission members, Planning Board members, Commission on Disability members, and Parks and Recreation members as well. Thank you for all being here. All right, you want to switch to the next slide, please? Perfect. So just to start off with a little bit of background of this project, I'm sure this is probably a lot of people's first time hearing about this. Back in 2015, the City of Peavey's Recreation and Open Space Plan identified the goal of providing better connectivity and connection to some of the recreation and open space parcels up on Perkins Street. And in 2020, the city, with the help of Horsley Witten Group, developed the Eco-Recreational Campus Connectivity Plan, which provided an outline of enhanced access, improved connection, and greater pedestrian safety in the Perkins Street area. And then Brian, can you switch slides one more time, please? Great. And then this plan also worked to establish this vision of a unified sense of place of all of these recreation and open space parcels that we're talking about. And so to give you a little bit of a background of the areas that we're talking about, I want to point out some of them. We're Emerson Park, the First Responders Memorial, James Street Park, which we'll dive into a little bit more tonight, the dog park, skate park, and the Bob Driscoll ice skating rink, the Higgins Middle School, and then Scouting Woods as well. And then within Emerson Park and James Street, the different amenities as well, such as the Emerson Park basketball court and the playground and basketball court over at James Street. So you want to switch slides one more time, please, Brian? Great. So many of you might be familiar with this area, and you might be familiar with each park on their own or all the parks together. And currently some of these areas up there could feel disconnected. So the idea with the Eco Campus plan was to connect all of these spaces and really work to create this sense of place up there. We really want to make this whole area feel as one large park, Eco Campus, and really work on providing overall connectivity of the whole area, but as well as interparcel connectivity as well. And so a big goal of tonight's presentation is to, one, introduce the Eco Campus to the community and explain the overall goals of this project and, introduce everyone to this idea and this project up here. And then second to that, get feedback on our James Street Eco Campus Hub project that we're showing tonight. So Brian, you want to switch one more time? Great. So in that 2020 Eco Campus plan, they identified 2 projects that were critical to the overall connection of the entire project area. Those 2 projects were the multimodal pathway on Perkins Street, which is the picture there on the left, and also you can see on the right some of the upgrades to the crosswalks and sidewalk bump outs. And then the second project was the James Street Eco Campus Hub. And Horsley Witten and the city felt that these 2 would be critical to this overall connection and establishing this area. Brian, you want to switch, please? Perfect. And then right before we get into this, I do want to acknowledge that Mayor Bettencourt is in attendance tonight, and we'd like to ask him to say a few words. So I'm going to unmute him really quickly.
Good evening. Could you hear me, Drew?
We can, Mayor.
All right. I just wanted to say I'm very excited to be able to join you tonight. And Drew, you've done a terrific job kind of outlining what the Emerson Park area, James Street, Higgins Middle School area is all about to me. And I've said this many, many times. It's really the central park of the city. And we've really worked hard to try to add some amazing features to the area to really make the neighborhood and the city proud. And we've done some wonderful things with community input. And this is just another example of that. We're looking to do this project. And as you outlined, Drew, this is all about connectivity and trying to enhance the features we have there. And we're really interested in feedback from the neighbors, the residents, the community at large. So I'm very happy to be a part of this, very excited about the next step for that area and to do some more amazing things over in the Emerson Park area. So looking forward to the feedback, looking forward for everybody's input, and very happy to be a part of this. I wanted to thank you, Drew, for all the hard work you've put into getting us to this point. You've done a terrific job. You and the Community Development Department, and of course, Horsley Witten's been terrific to work with on a number of projects in the city. So just very excited to take the next step and looking forward to hearing the input from the residents, the neighbors, and people that are concerned and care about this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, do you want to begin?
Sure. Thanks, Drew. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight to participate in the meeting. In particular, thank the mayor for his words. I would like to echo his sentiments that we are also very excited about this project, working on the Eco Campus Connectivity Plan and now rolling into the James Street project. Has been a great experience for us, and we really look forward to seeing this project come to fruition. So as Drew and the mayor mentioned, the focus of the Eco Campus Connectivity Plan was to identify key elements and priority projects that will encourage an increased usage of biking, walking, and a use of trail networks, as well as improving access to the surrounding recreational amenities, which Drew pointed out. This site is really located at the intersection of James Street and Perkins Street, and the park provides one of the best placemaking opportunities within the campus, and was identified in the plan as a priority project and will serve as the central hub in the campus center. The real intent is to create a campus center which does not change the park's current use, but proposes to improve pedestrian connectivity with new sidewalks, artful painted crosswalks, and accessible woodland trail connections. The design also recommends the incorporation of green stormwater infrastructure into the landscape, along with the restorative native landscaping approach. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Brian Lavaria, and he's going to walk you through the design.
Well, thank you very much all for the introduction. I'm going to switch my screens here, so bear with us. Hopefully everybody now can see an aerial image with Henry J. Higgins Middle School on the left. Perkins Street is on the southern side of the page with the basketball court. Emerson Park is off to the right, and James Street Park is front and center of the aerial image. So as Drew and Brian had mentioned, hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Mayor.
Can you guys not hear me?
Nope, we can, Brian. You're all set.
Okay, sorry about that. So as Drew and Brian had mentioned during our planning process with the Eco Campus connectivity plan, we generated several concepts to start to illustrate what these areas could become and document what these areas already are. So one of the concepts that we did during that planning process was James Street Park, and how do we improve connectivity and give priority back to the pedestrian and improve access from the school to the surrounding parks. So this image was our 10% very preliminary basic concept design to get people excited and get people to understand our design intent to bring those woodland trails through this existing woodland today. So once we got the go-ahead from the city that this project was going to go into design development, we hit the ground and we did on-site survey. So this was field reconnaissance for us to really document the existing conditions today and understand our opportunities and our constraints. And opportunities would be existing native trees that are worth protecting. We want to know where they are. Other opportunities would be existing or historic stone walls that perhaps we want to incorporate into the final design. Constraints would be steep slopes, wetland areas, and invasive species. And so once we did the survey, we came back into the office and we started to analyze the information that we had so that we could take our concept design and move it forward. So the first thing we identified was 2 wetland areas that are in the woodland today that we want to protect and maintain. We also have a lot of grade change. We have a lot of topographic grade change on site today. So as many of us may know, James Street is significantly higher in elevation than Higgins Middle School. So traversing this terrain was going to be a challenge for us. And we also wanted our pathways to meet ADA standards, which is the American Disability Act, so that everybody, all ages and abilities, can use these trails. And from the topography, we can better understand the hydrology of the land, or how the land is draining today. So if we know the existing drainage patterns, when we start to make changes to the landscape, we can hopefully protect these drainage patterns to the best of our abilities, so that this wetland continues to see water and this wetland continues to see water when we're done. I had mentioned invasive plant species. There's a number of different species out there. Japanese knotweed is by far the most prevalent. It looks a lot like bamboo. You've probably seen it before. There are other species out there that we documented. And so this is another constraint that we're dealing with as we move forward, not only to get the trail system there, but also how do we restore this forest so that these invasives are not there anymore, and we have more of our native forest that you see when you walk around Peavey. So from the original concept, this was our original, sorry about that. This was our original concept path here. So when I turn the concept off, this was our original alignment before we had done any of the survey. So we didn't know where the trees were exactly. We didn't know where the slopes were most steep. Once we did the survey, we adjusted our alignment for the path within the woodlands to make sure it met ADA standards, all the guidelines that are required, as well as embrace the natural landforms, the topography, the existing trees that we want to protect, stone walls, the wetlands, all the things that we have just looked at together. You know, all that information is now coming full circle and led to this refined path layout. So with that path layout, I think one of our main questions tonight to get input on is if these connections make sense and if these connections are acceptable by the community. And so connection A would come out on James Street here, and this would help these residents potentially get to Higgins Middle School much more efficiently by foot than they are today. Connection B is at the intersection of James Street and James Street. This is both James Street here. So this is kind of an intersection connection with the pathway as well as the baseball field that's out there today. Connection C was the central hub that was identified during the connectivity plan. And this would be a pedestrian plaza right on the intersection with James Street and Perkins Street. And this would tie into the multimodal path that was just completed recently. So this would be a destination. This would be a plaza space that would transition you from Emerson Park to James Street Park, and then through Higgins Woods to the middle school. Connection D is at the Bob Driscoll ice skating rink. There's also a small gravel parking lot there that we would connect to. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, is our connection to the school itself. This will also activate this parking area. So now, you know, everybody that wants to use James Street Park or Emerson Park, there's additional parking and access on foot to get to all these parks. So you can start to see these parks becoming unified as access and connectivity is improved. So if I go back to this alignment, our focus area right now is on the central hub and on James Street, the street itself, and the transition between the street and the park. We want to do our best to make the street feel like it's part of the park and not that the park is part of the street. And furthermore, we want to give the pedestrian the priority here. So the cars yield to the pedestrians. The pedestrians have universal access to cross James Street, use these different areas, and then continue on whatever direction they may go. So I'll walk you through very quickly what this design is showing at the central hub, and then I think we'll open it up for some discussion between all of us. So we'll start right at the central hub here. As I mentioned, this would be at the intersection with Perkins Street and James Street. This would be accessible with potentially bollards, so there wouldn't be a curb here. So if you were on a bike or a wheelchair, you would be able to access this plaza. There might be a campus map here. So this would show the entire eco campus, whether you're local to Peabody or you're a tourist to Peabody. This might be an area where you figure out, you know, where is the school, where is Emerson Park, or what new additions are there that maybe I don't know about, like where is Scouting Woods in relationship to the central hub. We're also seeing increased bike racks. We've noticed through our analysis that the bike racks at Higgins schools are heavily used. So we want to increase the bike racks and hopefully, you know, encourage people to bike and walk as much as they can. We're also seeing some passive play space with shade structures that would match the dog park across the street. This might be a, you know, human-sized chessboard or something similar to that, but very informal play space here. The basketball court, of course, would remain. The playground today would remain. Part of the design does incorporate a sidewalk along James Street. There isn't currently a sidewalk today, so I've seen many folks walking down the street itself. So we want to give the opportunity for people to have a place that they have priority in. So here it's that sidewalk. And then last but not least would be a splash garden. So this would be a future phase of the project, but we're thinking this area across the street might be an amazing opportunity to add an additional park use. So as of now, we're proposing a splash garden, but I think, you know, there's certainly opportunities here for other ideas if people in the community think, you know, a different park use would fit there better. And I think with no further ado, Drew, unless you want me to elaborate on anything.
No, I think it looks great, Brian.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody that's attending tonight would like to ask any questions or make any comments, we ask that you use the raise hand function on Zoom. And we see some people raising their hand now, so I will unmute you and then you'll be allowed to talk. So I'll start doing that. It looks like we have a question right here.
Hi, Drew. How are you? This is Joe Miko. How's it going?
How's it going? Thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you for having us. I'm at 7 James Street, so I'm actually right at the right beyond the baseball. I would say the concession stand. So I'm looking at this, and I just had a couple of questions, and one of the questions I have when I've been talking to my neighbors was, This is great, but maybe we could also do a walking tour of this with some neighbors and some city officials and the engineers, just to get a better feel of the space. And we actually did this when we built the Higgins School as well in 2016. Actually, about 2015, we had a walking tour because initially we were going to have an opening at the bottom of James Street to have students just walk through, but there was no really walk through there. And the neighbors were concerned about cars driving down James Street and just literally dropping kids off, and it could have posed of a dangerous situation. So that's the first thing I would ask, is if we could at some point schedule a time and get some residents down there from James Street and Augustus, just this little part of the neighborhood, because we've seen a lot of great construction in this area, and I think part of the great construction is that the residents have been involved and have toured the facilities. Other than that, what is a splash garden, Brian? I'm sorry, you mentioned a splash garden in the project. I was just curious on what that entails and what that is.
So some people call them like spray parks, spray pads. It would be an area where it'd be like fountains that come out of the ground. So it's mostly for little kids, I would say. That would probably be who it would attract. But it's like a spray garden.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that would be used in the summertime.
Okay.
Right.
And the only other question I have, and I'll yield, is lighting along the path. Even with the Higgins Middle School, the lights are usually on at night for safety reasons, and it does light up the area pretty well. So I know some of the residents would be concerned about lighting in the area. The other part too is cutting down the brush. We do get a humming sound from Rousselet, the plant. So that's something that I think residents would be concerned about when we finally fill in that area with trees and such. If that would help with the humming sounds from Rousselet. But I'll yield, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. And again, if we can just involve the residents a little bit more, this would be awesome. I'm sure it's going to be a great project. So thank you for bringing this to us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your comments, Joe. And in regards to the light, we see these paths existing much like the Independence Greenway or the South Peavey Trail, where it'd be a dusk to dawn situation where it would not be encouraged to be used at night. So we were not calling for lighting on the path.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you. Great job, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Gonna switch there. Tom here is asking a question, so I'm gonna allow him to talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, thank you. Tom Uxley, Peavey Disability Commission. And I just had a couple of questions. What are you using for the surfaces of the walkways?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the width? Is it a minimum of 42 inches or something, I think?
So as of now, Tom, we're thinking it's going to be an impervious surface. We're not exactly sure if it's going to be asphalt yet, but those are our assumptions, that it will be a paved path.
Uh-huh.
And most of the path will be 8 feet wide.
Oh, okay. All right, great.
Yep.
The other question was, I noticed that there was handicap parking on James Street. I think from one of the diagrams you had put up. But I was wondering, where you cross the street, where the path crosses Perkins Street and goes up the street towards Perkins, the ball field and stuff up there.
Yep.
Would there be some handicap parking on Perkins Street, so that they could be nearer that field rather than parking on James Street and having to roll all the way, over, crossing Perkins Street and rolling up the path to access the other park. Because they do want some handicap parking on Perkins Street and connect that handicap parking to that path.
Tom, great question. So currently for the James Street project, that's a little bit out of our project scope at the moment, but for the total project, that is definitely something that we can inquire and investigate and look into. And it's a great point. And that's something that we can definitely look into doing.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can leave it at that at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your comments, Tom.
No, thank you.
Looks like Councillor Charest is raising his hand. So I'm going to allow him to talk at the moment.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it. The diagram shows quite a bit. And I know at the last meeting we had, just actually before COVID, that there was a conversation of having the availability of mobile food stations being able to participate. Is that something you're still looking at in this scope?
Yeah, I think that's something that we can, definitely look into. I think it'd just be coming down to depending on where they could park within the James Street area. But yeah, I mean, we see this area as really being a community area. Not only is this a pedestrian hub for connectivity, but we see it as being the community hub as well. So I think, anything that promotes community connection and different events in that area will definitely be an opportunity.
Sure. And I really do like the idea of having the sidewalk in front of the basketball station, the
Right.
James Street there, that there isn't one. And it is, I was just down there last night during the basketball game and baseball games, and you do have everyone getting in the cars, moving out, and people walking. So it doesn't give them any designated area to walk. So I think that's essential. I think that's a really great move to go to improve that area. And certainly would want to have, as Mr. Miko talked about, participation from the neighbors. And I know the last meetings, you opened it up to the neighbors, and several ones were there. And I have spoken to numerous people, not just abutting the park area, but also on Ellsworth and Augusta and those other side streets. So I know you're certainly open to that and listening to them. So I do appreciate that. I know it may be a stretch a little bit down the line for the splash park or spray stations of things of that nature. There's pros and cons always to that. And I know the filtration system is expensive, and to be able to design. There's one other thought. If there's for more of a quieter use, is a putting station, a small miniature golf area type of thing, that people may be able to bring their own balls and putters and be able to utilize that. So just a thought, some there to another activity for people to use.
Neat. Yep.
But overall, I won't take up time. I really do appreciate that. The access point, the A, B, C, D, and E, is really interesting to see how many places people can enter and walk that trail and get to certain parts of that park. I do like the idea about being able to have the kids be able to walk to school. And I do have concern with, and I know it was during the whole time of construction in the middle school, of people dropping off kids in the morning and picking up along James Street there. So we would certainly take the efforts to make sure that doesn't happen.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Charest.
Drew, I would just add a couple of things to what the councilor mentioned, just for clarification. That the trail project is ahead as far as the design schedule, and we're looking to advance that to a 75% design level that would be suitable for permitting, and the park plan would be at a 25%. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to weigh in and to voice their thoughts on the spray park and other amenities as well. And then as far as the food trucks, I just want to remind everyone that that was identified in the eco connectivity plan, and really the long-term vision of the city is that as the eco plan and the connectivity is implemented, this really activates this space even more. So it really does become a central hub. So you could envision festivals and different sorts of events within the campus, and this being sort of the space maybe where there would be food trucks park or other activities. Thanks.
Thank you.
Which that was a perfect segue into a question that was asked in the Q&A by Rick Lynch, who asked, will there be anything to address the lack of space for people to watch baseball games along the third base line? They're oftentimes in the street. And Brian just kind of answered that a little bit, but yes, I mean, that is definitely something that we are looking at and we know about, and will be something that, as Brian mentioned, we move the park plans forward. We do want to make sure that pedestrian safety is paramount in this area, and that it is, as we mentioned, a park type feel, so that you will feel safe to be able to watch these games. So that is an item that is on our list of things to do, implement in the park plan. So we are looking at that.
Yeah, and there is opportunity in the outfield as well. If we can clean up some of the invasives and open that space, I watched my son play, and that's one of my favorite vantage points is from the outfield. So hopefully that would open up additional space for people to watch the games.
Yeah, and at a minimum along the third base line, there'd be the sidewalk in the future.
Yep.
That you might be able to stand on and watch.
Perfect. And then an anonymous attendee has asked, will there be trash receptacles at the entrances and benches along the paths? Again, as we move the project forward, or as we move the plans forward, these will be items that will start to be identified on the plan and shown. But yes, we are looking to implement benches and trash receptacles there. Brian had showed it on one of his slides, but that kind of campus hub plaza area is really looking to be this central hub of, community engagement. Yeah. And, as we move these plans forward, these are the items that will start to be identified and implemented in the plans. All right, and then moving on, another attendee has asked, will James Street continue to be a two-way road? Currently, on the plan, we have it shown as being intended to be a one-way road heading from Perkins Street towards Augustus. This is something that we are proposing at the moment, but this was one of the goals of this project was to, inquire about feedback on this proposal. The idea with this being a one-way road is, again, the pedestrian safety being paramount in this project. And we feel that with one way, you can provide more pedestrian safety, but that was a goal of ours here tonight to hear more feedback on what the community would like to see.
And from a design standpoint, this creates space for us to make that sidewalk by reducing the width of this road once we get past the basketball court. So if this was two-way and we wanted the sidewalk, we might need to adjust the alignment of James Street slightly to make horizontal space to build that sidewalk. That would be the only thing I would say from a design standpoint.
That's a great point.
It also makes this parking area feel like a parking lot for James Street, with still two-way in and out from Perkins. So you could come in, park, and then leave and not have to really go into the neighborhood at all.
Right. In the road diet, or reducing the road width, as Brian mentioned, and adding the sidewalk, what we're hoping to accomplish there is to make the park feel more like one space, where right now that road bisects it, and there's the area that's just mowed grass right now where people sometimes park.
Right.
That was sort of the thought, that to make it feel less like a road, correct? Thanks, Brian, and more like one cohesive park.
Exactly.
Great. Well, it looks like I do not see any more questions in the Q&A, and there doesn't seem to be any hands unless anybody would like to ask any more questions here.
I would just add that somebody else voted for the putting green.
I'm a golfer. I'd be there.
That's why I mentioned it. I knew Brian is an avid golfer, so I know he would be excited to see there's 2 votes for a putting green.
Well, thank you everyone for attending tonight. And
We have another question.
one more question. How many spots would there be at the James Street baseball field?
That's a good question.
How many parking spots? Or
It looks like that, yes, parking spots.
Well, this sketch that we've done is only 25%. So we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with 2 handicap accessible spaces right now.
But I think more importantly, Brian, is that where they're currently parking, if you go to the other plan, we're proposing to keep the parking within the lawn area. We're just putting a divider in so it's more formalized. And that's what you can see the line. We have, I believe that's a guardrail. Is that correct?
Oh, over here. Yes. So this would still be intended to be overflow parking.
That's correct.
Yes. Sorry. Maybe I misinterpreted. Yeah. So this would still be overflow parking, and this would be paved formal parking. So I don't have a number, like an exact number here, but we're not planning on reducing the overflow parking.
The idea is to provide, as Ryan mentioned, the differentiation between the parking lot and the street to provide that extra safety and really formalize, as they mentioned, that parking. But then again, adding to that safety of being able to watch the game down that third base line, as was previously mentioned.
And we do realize that the main function of this park has always been active recreation with both the basketball court and the baseball field. So our intent is not to really alter or impact those uses, but as we mentioned earlier, and as Brian's demonstrated, to enhance especially the relationship of the park to Perkins Street, but then also the connectivity and make this feel more like a central hub to a much larger park campus.
Yep. Yeah, and then to parking, this pathway is going to be accessible. So in the summertime, when this parking lot's totally empty, there's no reason people couldn't park at Higgins Middle School and then traverse the pathway up to the baseball diamond.
And just one other thing, I'm not sure we mentioned, Brian, but the boardwalk connectivity going over the wetland and the educational opportunity that we've identified as well with the Higgins Middle School. So we're exploring a potential small outdoor classroom where the students could then learn about wetlands and habitat, and that boardwalk would provide an opportunity for educational outreach and signage as well.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a big deal for us.
Yeah, adding on to Brian's thought, I mean, this kind of goes back to the whole idea of a connectivity plan where I grew up playing baseball at James Street and I grew up playing baseball at Emerson Park. And when you went to either one, you parked at that park and that's where you played baseball, and you really didn't go in between them. So the idea here is that we would want to make it as easy as possible for you to park really anywhere within this eco campus or access the eco campus from any one of its access points and get between each parcel and the whole area, as easy as possible and as safely as possible. So, and then we find that as we mentioned, the Perkins Street multimodal pathway, does just that, and that this eco campus hub will, also be critical to this overall connection.
And it does open up the Higgins Middle School for additional overflow parking for larger events or even for a baseball game, because we would now provide a much easier access, especially during off-school hours or summertime or, in the weekends.
Mm-hmm. And I do just want to acknowledge Tom's comment about bench access. along the paths needs to be an accessible space next to the bench and access to the bench. And then mentions that usually benches are set back off the path.
So I think as of now, we're only proposing benches at the central hub, which would be offset off the path. They're a touch difficult to see here, but they would be bump outs that would be just for the benches. We're not proposing any benches on the woodland trail itself at this time. We do have pause points, so these will be flat areas within the woodland system where you can stop and maybe read a sign, an educational interpretive sign, or just, enjoy the natural woodlands. But right now, we're not thinking there's going to be any benches within the woods itself.
Correct, but benches could always be added at a later date too, if it's determined that people are pausing and stopping or would like to have a place to sit. I think Brian and myself are not big advocates of putting benches in for the sake of benches. It's sometimes it's better to find or to determine if people actually are going to use the benches to sit. So that's certainly something that could be added on though, and I think it's a good idea and something that probably should be considered.
Mr. Miko, I see that you raised your hand again. Are you wishing to ask another question or make another comment?
The paths.
Thank you, Drew. Yes, I just, and I think Brian had mentioned I'm looking across from the baseball, I would say first baseline
Just the
area.
baseline.
And you see the trees there, but I think Brian did mention that the parking for the baseball will still be there because, on any given day, as you know, we could have 50 cars parked there, and that could be a major challenge for James Street. And a lot of the baseball parents do park there, so it's if we can just keep that. I think you mentioned that you are going to keep that area for parking. No, I think that's my only question. But I do think I've been getting some texts from residents and neighbors. I do think that at some point we will need to sit down and just go over a few items. But this is great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I can look to schedule something that in the near future and definitely involve you with that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Drew. Thank you. Great job, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Drew, if I could just ask one last time, because Brian sort of addressed this during his presentation, if everyone thinks the access points that we're showing A through E make sense, if anyone has any strong opinions one way or the other, it'd be great to know them, because as I mentioned, the pathway design is on a more aggressive schedule, so we are trying to complete the 75% designs.
I think Councillor Charest, were you looking to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Drew. Just on the E location, it has you going up a little bit towards the left-hand side. I'm assuming more people who are going to use E would be heading towards the basketball field or the baseball. Could that go towards more to the right, so there's not up to the left and been back down type of thing? Would it be is there a reason why you're not going that route?
So the main driver is the grades. So in order to get our path to meet ADA guidelines, we can only go up to 5% running slope before we would need a handrail or level landings.
Okay.
So to avoid that, really we want our path to be 5% or less. So to meet those guidelines, this is probably our best alignment, especially in this area here. There's some funky glacial erratics or what look like exposed bedrock in this location here.
Yep.
So to traverse that would be very difficult unless you're going to, excavate that bedrock out of there, dynamite that bedrock. So I think from a cost standpoint, we avoided this little knoll.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this topography is doing this funky looking stuff here. So really the main driver, Ed, is the ADA requirements that we're trying to meet.
Okay,
And there isn't a ton of flexibility, to be honest with you, with this alignment to
Sure.
meet those requirements.
okay, great. And what is the distance from E to either side of the field, the A or the B entrance? Do you know what that distance is approximately?
That's a really good question. I guess maybe 1,000 feet, but don't hold me to that. I can calculate that pretty quickly. I don't have that right off the top
Okay.
of my head.
Next time.
I bet it's right around 1,000 feet from C to E if you were to walk that path.
Okay. And probably the same from B to E too, correct? It looks like about the same, maybe a little longer, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll calculate that. I can get the linear feet. That would be nice to know.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because I think, Brian, we should definitely do that from the different access points, just calculating what the distance of each one is.
Sure. And is there is there any thought of having a sidewalk incorporated from A to B or B to A somewhere over there?
So right now we're thinking no, only because the pitch of the road doesn't meet the requirements that we need to meet.
Okay.
So if we started to change the grade of that road, we would need to meet the requirements to call this ADA. And so
Sure.
I think that becomes a much larger project than the city wants to take on.
Sure. Great.
I think there's also an issue with drop off too, right? That we're trying to be sensitive to
drop-off.
that. Yeah, that we don't want to make it a sidewalk may make it a more formal drop off zone.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Yep.
Good point. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
And to Joe's earlier comment about parking, I think our intent is to keep the gravel parallel parking here today. It's not really shown on this graphic, but that is our intent. And then our thought is to add a guardrail so that we could plant trees to, again, make this feel like a park. So people can still park wherever they want to along James Street, but the guardrail would protect these trees, especially when the trees are younger. But you could still drive around the guardrail, park here, and exit.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we have a couple comments and questions in the chat. So somebody asked, what is the difference between the black and brown colors on the path? The black is showing the part that would be paved, and the brown is showing a proposed boardwalk.
Correct.
In that section. And then Mr. Miko makes the comment of the corner of James and James could be tricky for a path. He mentions that he lives on that corner and that there's lots of pedestrians and cars in that small space. Yeah. So as these plans move forward, these are something that we will we can evaluate. We'll chat with the design team here, and we can continue to evaluate that and look at it further. Definitely. So, Mr. Tom, were you looking to ask a question again? I see your hand still raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think you kind of answered it with regards to the benches. The reason I had asked that question was because we ran into problems on the Peavey bike path where the benches were set back, but they weren't accessible because they were set back off the path, and they were surrounded by crushed stone or grass or something like that. So there was no place for, like a concrete pad for a wheelchair to pull up next to the bench or whatever, without rolling over the grass or something like that. So, but you kind of answered it because I think you said that you weren't going to have at this point any benches along the way that you knew of. So, I think you answered that question for me.
And Tom, and in the plaza, we can certainly accommodate a pad for a wheelchair next to a bench. I think that's something that we can accommodate.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's great. And is there other than that one parking area for this project, there wouldn't be any other parking area to access the paths?
Well, I think our intent is to have this path connect all the various parking throughout the eco campus.
Yep.
We're not going to add any additional formal parking. We're just going to do our best to connect the parking that's already there so that this parking lot feels useful in the summertime to James Street Park because it's now accessible.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments, Tom, and questions. I'm looking at the attendee here list, and it looks like no one else has raised their hand. So I just want to, again, thank everyone for attending tonight. We'll take all these comments in and, evaluate them, and we'll come back, or we'll look to have another community meeting as these plans continue and progress. And we can definitely look into and schedule a walkthrough up there with the neighbors and the design team, and to look at this area. This is great feedback. This is exactly what we were looking for tonight. We really were looking for this feedback and to hear from the community. And I think, we got just what we were looking for. And, second to that, introduce people to this campus hub and, the eco campus in this area. And, next time you're up there, you'll start to see maybe a little bit different that, driving through, the eco campus now in this park area. So again, thank you all for attending. Thank you for those that commented, and thank you all for listening tonight. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Drew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Good night.
All right.